When you think of American Indian characters in literature, do you often think of this? Yeah, well, I hate to break it to you, but that's not what it's like. Over the last few years, I've been addressing the issues regarding proper representation, but that doesn't only apply to main characters who are American Indian descent. And that also applies to the supporting characters as well. Without representation and with proper research, they tend to become more one-dimensional characters. Exhibit A. That lack complexity, which can cause storytelling to appear a little boring and predictable. And overall cause the portrayal later on in media the gain more flaws in the nuance and realism to the story. Right now we're gonna go over the effects of properly researching and gaining better knowledge so they don't become like this. No, it's not so impossible to believe that American Indians could have regular jobs in a role rather than just being portrayed as the mystic shamans or bloody savages. They could have jobs like from doctors to superheroes, even regular students. Their role in the story can let their culture exist without needing to portray them in a cliche negative light. It's bad enough when a character lacks depths and qualities that the reader can identify and understand with them. But using a flat character to represent a marginalized culture can have damaging consequences. Even in scenarios where an American Indian character can technically be portraying an antagonist, that doesn't necessarily mean they have to be a one-dimensional obstacle in the story. Note that I use the word antagonist rather than villain or bad guy. That's because while an antagonist may oppose or create tension for a main character, that doesn't necessarily mean they're a bad person overall. For example, in a story, an antagonist can be represented more as a certain concept or emotion, and a hated character may just have an indirect or direct action and that influences that conflict. Just within the last few decades even, in the historical figures such as this guy, were properly called out for the atrocities that have been overlooked. Remember him? Christopher Columbus? Yeah, you might know him as the one time in October you get a day off. But overall, besides his so-called positive accomplishments, his story has been a little more one-sided. Said facts and truths are necessarily bringing to light a reminder that they can remind the reader and possibly future writers interested in American Indian literature that improper and overlooked citations will only contribute to misinformation and about the true nature behind the character of the story and how they properly contribute to the narrative. That wouldn't be the only time when an American Indian's role in the story was diminished as a one-dimensional antagonist, frequently shown in older works like Little House on the Prairie, for example. Right? That example is probably well known for portraying Native Americans as the book puts it, both dirty, thieving savages and the noble savage. And Maud, the dog, Jack, and many other settlers had nothing but hatred for the Indians. Pa was more tolerant, and Laura was both fearful and fascinated. Even the fascination that some of the main characters had with the tribe didn't seem to come from a place of respect, or an interest in the culture, more as viewing them in wild animals in the forest, or even animals in a zoo. they don't really see them as human. And if the story was written today, I feel like the Osage tribe, it would be a little more developed with their own perspective and their own experiences rather than just being an inconvenience to the main characters. It doesn't even feel right to address this certain tribe as the antagonist of the story, since their role mainly involved being inadvertently confusing and scary to the white settlers and before eventually moving to a new land. If you thought this narrative meant a lot to do with the fact that the author herself was a young pioneer settler, and most likely was biased over who caused the most trouble. It seems that a community is chosen and to be portrayed in a lot, which has a lot to do with the fact that the biased and picking a side, so put it. While it's possible to be neutral about certain groups, it does not completely single out the possibility of favoritism when it comes to conflicts, which may greatly affect how the opposing side may be chosen to be portrayed. Overall, false narratives tend to have a negative impact in not only creating a misconception or misreading of a character, but also confuse and misinform the reader in believing an unbalanced portrayal. The lack of storytelling in such American Indian characters may also heavily be affected by a lack of proper knowledge and research to flesh out the background and origins properly. Overall, addressing the issues regarding proper representation in American Indian literature not only applies to the characters who are the protagonists, but also the supporting characters within the story also. Which is why writing American Indians as one-dimensional characters is problematic and can be harmful, because it erases their diversity and their individualism. And soon enough, all the contributions to racial stereotypes will just increase, and it's important to remember that American Indians should be written as complex characters with unique cultures, backgrounds, and motivations, meaning they should not be reduced to stereotypical roles or used as a plot device or props for other characters. By writing them as fully developed characters, authors can create an accurate and respectful representation of the culture and people involved. Simple as that.